Welcome, everyone. This is a great occasion, and I'm so excited to be here. One of the great things about deciding to get out of administration is if one of your best friends is giving a humanities lecture at the same time as a basketball game, you can come to the humanities lecture. So I'm so excited to be here, and actually, when I told Coach Williams how much I love Joy Kasson, he told me I was in the right place tonight, so things are more complicated than people actually think. I have been a strong advocate for the liberal arts as an indispensable part of higher education, and it's an honor and a privilege to make that case. We all need to make it as much as we can. I go around everywhere I go now. People want to know what can they do to help their university. And the top of my list is advocating for the liberal arts as not just something that's important to preserve our culture and some of the things we talk about, but also as a competitive advantage for the United States and for North Carolina. I've traveled all around the world talking to my colleagues who run universities, and they're all trying to copy what we have here. And what they're trying to copy is our ability to teach students how to think, how to write, how to communicate, and most importantly, how to do jobs that haven't been created yet. And they're not sitting around having big commissions trying to decide whether it's important or not. They're trying to copy us as aggressively and as quickly as they possibly can. And we have to make sure that we preserve what it is that has made America what it is, has made North Carolina what it is, and that is our tradition in the liberal arts. And there's no better exemplar of that than Joy Kasson. She is a great scholar, a great friend, and a pioneer in the history of our institution, and advocating and being an example for women faculty and for promoting young scholars and for creating her discipline here at Carolina of American Studies. And we're very close to having a PhD in American Studies, which is something that Joy and I have worked on together quite happily. So thank you all for letting me be part of your event tonight, and welcome.
Thank you, Holden, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to bring you warm greetings on behalf of the College of Arts and Sciences as we gather in memory of the late Maynard Adams for the kind of discussion he would have enjoyed. Eve, where are you? We're so grateful for your wonderful leadership of the Humanities program and the Adams Lecture Series. For more than 3 decades, the Humanities program has brought together extraordinary scholars and members of the broader community for the mutual pursuit of exciting ideas. Listen to these statistics. To date, the program has sponsored some 900 public seminars, workshops, and conferences for over 57,000 participants. That's an amazing record. Our mission in the College of Arts and Sciences is to foster innovative learning, discovery, and engagement. An important aspect of our mission is connecting the dots between teaching, research, and community. And we are fortunate to live in a community that welcomes the exploration of ideas, old and new, where teachers and scholars live next door to other lifelong learners, and where the Humanities program is dedicated to bringing them together. It all began in 1979 when Maynard Adams, the extraordinary philosopher and teacher, started the Humanities program. And since 1998, the annual E.M. Adams Lectureship has featured some of the greatest UNC Humanities scholars of our time. As our Chancellor just stated, this afternoon we'll hear from one of our very distinguished colleagues, a neighbor, as we explore the necessity of the arts with Joy Kasson. Joy, it's a very timely subject in a period that's very important for this university, so we thank you. Please join me now in thanking the Humanities program for bringing us all together and for bringing Joy Kasson to us today.
wow, maybe I should just go home right now. Thank you so much for all the kind words. It's a thrill to be here. It's wonderful to see so many friends and colleagues, and one of my students is actually here in the audience. Thank you very much for coming. It's especially a privilege to give a lecture named for Maynard Adams. When I first arrived here, when John and I first arrived here in 1971, Maynard Adams was, of course, a distinguished philosopher. He was very kind to a young humanist who had the temerity to volunteer for some committee or other that he was chairing. And then when Warren Nord collaborated with Maynard to create this amazing program, I've enjoyed so often seminars for teachers and others, and I can just still see Warren keeping everybody happy, amused, but most importantly of all, thinking deeply. So it's a privilege to talk to you today, and under Eve's leadership, we're going ever forward. The question I want to ask today is, why are the arts necessary today in the age of digital media? From the comfort of my own laptop or iPad or smartphone, I can look at great works of art in major museums, or watch video clips on YouTube, or download and listen to musical performances. Why should I go to a concert when I have already heard, say, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony on my own earphones? Why should I visit a museum unless it is to take digital pictures of myself in front of works of art with my back to them, just to prove I was there? That's not me. I took the picture. I want to explore today some of the reasons why encounters with the arts are in fact irreplaceable, speaking to our deepest hopes and fears, providing insights we can use in our own lives. Experiencing the arts means, first of all, being part of an audience. By the way, every time I show a video clip, it'll get dark, but it'll get light again, I promise you. And so I will start with some reflections on what it means to be present at a live performance.
A few final do's and don'ts as we head into the performance. Please don't riffle through your programs trying to match us up with our headshots. We don't look like that anymore. And please don't cough. It tends to throw the actors off. All right, it isn't Aristophanes, but please don't cough. Don't say what to every line you think you haven't got. And if you're in a snit because you've missed the plot, of which I must admit there's still don't say what. If you see flaws, please don't drop your jaws, please. No loud guffaws, please. If things don't go as planned, when there's a pause, please. Lots of applause, please. If we don't get a hand, you'll have to stand for one that's canned. Don't go, oh, whenever there's a song you know. And when you hear the verse, don't whisper low. They cut that out of town, I saw the show. I don't recall the tempo being quite that slow. And please, refrain from eating sweets in cellophane.
That was Bronson Pinchot in Invocation and Instructions to the Audience from Stephen Sondheim's 1974 adaptation of The Frogs, performed as part of the 2000 Sondheim Review putting it together. How charming to be remembered that we turn to the arts at different times for different reasons, including amusement. But we also seek aesthetic pleasure and intellectual stimulation. Sometimes we want to attend a Shakespeare play, or a concert by a major symphony orchestra, or visit a venerable art museum. We might revisit well-known classics to reconnect with our own history of aesthetic experiences. Sometimes we want the arts to shake us up and challenge our expectations. Edward Albee's play, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, is 50 years old now, but it still has the power to shock and disturb, as demonstrated by Playmaker's production last year and the current revival in New York. New aesthetic forms can be intensely disquieting. Italian stage director Romeo Castellucci uses sound and sets to create overwhelming environments. I knew I would do this. Tragedia Endoconidia, a 9-production series of plays, has been described as a research project on the future of tragedy, pushing back the limits of sound and image in the act of theater. A review in The Guardian of a segment shown in London in 2004 commented on its bloody violence and said that its musical score creates a sense of unease with its rumbles, pops, and screams that feel as if it is happening inside your head. Here, in an artwork created by Plastic Art for the first segment, A number 1, a sculpted model of a human lower body is filled with artificial blood and inverted during the course of the performance. To say the least, attending such a production is very different from listening to a Mozart symphony. But all these experiences are part of the rich spectrum of human responses made possible by the arts. But in today's world, the arts are both abundant and imperiled. For abundance, we have no farther to look than the UNC campus, where Carolina Performing Arts is presenting its extraordinary season, including the year-long celebration of modern creativity, the Rite of Spring at 100. I hope you've all been going to that, and if you haven't, come to some of the remaining performances. Or Playmaker's Repertory Company, with its consistent commitment to fresh and innovative productions. Or the Ackland Art Museum, with special exhibitions ranging from American vernacular art to Japanese printmaking and an outstanding permanent collection. I'm sure members of this audience have ample experience with all these resources that enrich our lives so deeply here in Chapel Hill. For evidence of peril, we note the financial pressures that beset cultural institutions, from museums to opera houses, the retreat from government funding for the arts, and the sacrifice of arts instruction in cash-strapped schools. Equally disturbing is the casual assumption often encountered in the United States that the arts are peripheral, expendable, and probably hard to understand. When the US television network NBC broadcast the opening ceremony of the London Olympics on July 27, 2012, it chose to cut away from Danny Boyle's production Isles of Wonders at the moment that a young British choreographer, Akram Khan, performed a section called Mortality, described in the program as the struggle between life and death using such powerful images of mortality as dust and the setting sun. The piece, performed to the music of the hymn Abide by Me, began with images of loved ones lost by those in the stadium and was interpreted as a tribute to the 52 victims of the terrorist bombing that hit London in 2005 on the very day the city's choice as the Olympic venue was announced. NBC defended its decision to omit this portion of the production by stating, "Our program is tailored for the US television audience," and commenting that they live streamed many sports events, but the opening and closing ceremonies are entertainment spectacles. Khan's segment of the production was replaced by an interview with American swimmer Michael Phelps. NBC's decision was widely criticized, but it's hard to argue with the network's conclusion that modern dance does not command a wide American audience, and that the narrative of Michael Phelps's drive for gold medals was, by contrast, comprehensible and captivating to viewers. That story continued to dominate NBC's coverage of the news. More than a decade earlier, acclaimed Peruvian writer Mario Vargas Llosa detected a similar animus against literature in the 21st century, and he responded with an outspoken essay in the New Republic entitled, "Why Literature?" Vargas Llosa begins by noting disapprovingly that in the contemporary world, literature has become a dispensable activity, no doubt lofty and useful for cultivating sensitivity and good manners, but essentially an entertainment, an adornment that only people with time for recreation can afford. It is something to fit in between sports, the movies, a game of bridge or chess. It can be sacrificed without scruple when one prioritizes the tasks and duties that are indispensable in the struggle of life. To the contrary, Vargas Llosa asserts, literature should be viewed as one of the most primary and necessary undertakings of the mind, an irreplaceable activity for the formation of citizens in a modern and democratic society, a society of free individuals. Vargas Llosa, a novelist himself and 2010 recipient of the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote with passion about the value of literature, but what he had to say is applicable to the arts more generally. He could be speaking about theater, dance, music, and art when he writes that literature holds, quote, an important place in the life of nations. Without it, the critical mind, which is the real engine of historical change and the best protector of liberty, would suffer an irreparable loss. This is because all good literature is radical and poses radical questions about the world in which we live. A free and democratic society must have responsible and critical citizens, conscious of the need continuously to examine the world that we inhabit and to try, even though it is more and more an impossible task, to make it more closely resemble the world that we would like to inhabit. In 2010, philosopher and critic Martha Nussbaum made a similar case in her book, Not for Profit: Why Democracy Needs the Humanities. Decrying the perception that the arts and humanities are useless frills, leading to cuts in humanities and arts education at every level in the US and elsewhere, Nussbaum cautioned, if this trend continues, nations all over the world will soon be producing generations of useful machines rather than complete citizens who can think for themselves, criticize tradition, and understand the significance of another person's sufferings and achievements. Citizens cannot relate well to the complex world around them by factual knowledge and logic alone, Nussbaum wrote. Arguing that literature and the arts cultivate empathy and understanding of others, she quoted from an essay by Ralph Ellison, expressing his hope that his novel Invisible Man could be what he called a raft of perception, hope, and entertainment on which American culture could negotiate the snags and whirlpools that stand between us and our democratic ideal. The humanities and arts, she concluded, require support because they make a world that is worth living in. So this is a tall order, to see the arts and humanities as the foundation on which our very survival as a democratic nation rests. To be more specific, I would like to apply these thoughts to 3 works by contemporary American artists to see how art deepens our notions of citizenship and democracy. And the first part is called Reclaiming Neglected Histories, Judy Chicago, The Dinner Party. Let us start with an artist for whom politics, broadly speaking, has never been far from the surface. Judy Cohen grew up in a left-wing family during the McCarthy years, and she developed as an artist at the height of the women's movement of the 1960s and 70s. In 1970, she renamed herself after her native city, renouncing both her maiden name and the name of her late husband. Judy Garowitz hereby divests herself of all names imposed upon her through male social dominance and freely chooses her own name, Judy Chicago. The very 70s, right? In her 1975 autobiography, Through the Flower, Judy Chicago described the personal and artistic struggles that led her to look for new ways to create art that reflected a feminist conscience. I could no longer pretend in my art that being a woman had no meaning in my life. My entire experience was being shaped by it. I decided to try and deal with it in my work to symbolize my sense of myself. Her reorientation as an artist led to a number of innovative ideas, including collaborative work, installation art, and research into the history of women artists, past and present. In 1971, she had joined forces with feminist artist Miriam Shapiro at the California Institute of the Arts to create a project that came to be called Woman House. Renovating an abandoned house, the two artists, with a team of other women, created an installation that interpreted various aspects of women's lives through its different rooms. In a room called Sheet Closet, a nude mannequin is trapped in the neatly arranged shelves of bedclothes. In Nurturant Kitchen, an eerie pink light pervaded the room while walls and ceilings drooped with plastic breasts. An audience of almost 10,000 people visited the house during the month it was open, and it hosted a variety of performance events as well. As Judy Chicago would later put it, Woman House was important because it was a step toward building an art that allowed women to feel that their lives had meaning, that their experiences were rich, and that they had something of value to contribute to the world as women. In many respects, Woman House forecast Judy Chicago's trajectory as an artist, breaking from traditional art forms and materials, seeking to embody a woman's perspective in ways that were often confrontational and intentionally disturbing, valuing process as well as product, and stressing collaboration. Even while completing Woman House, Judy Chicago had begun the research that would lead to her signal contribution as an artist, the complex installation piece, The Dinner Party, the conceptualization, planning, and execution of which occupied her for most of the 1970s. It is worth reflecting that the same decade saw the beginnings of academic study of women's role in religion, history, art, music, and other fields. But at the end of the following decade, students were still being taught that women's contributions could and should be dismissed in favor of traditional canons in all these fields. When Judy Chicago became curious about what she called our lost heritage of art by women, she became convinced that, quote, much of the work of women possesses a worldview, a set of values, and a perception of reality that differs fundamentally from the dominant perspective of our culture. Working with an ever-expanding group of collaborators, she conceived of an artwork that would be a female version of the Last Supper, a panoply of the greatest female figures, mythological, historical, fictional. In her original plan, she imagined 25 figures, each represented by a painted china plate, a traditional female craft. As her work progressed, she added the notion of embroidery, first on a tablecloth, then on cloth runners that complemented the imagery on the plate and marked each place setting. The number of places at the table swelled to 39, with 3 tables of 13 place settings each, arranged in a triangular shape, as you can see in this photograph. As her research team turned up more and more historical figures, she conceived the idea of a heritage floor, which you can see in the space between the tables and also on the very edge, representing 999 additional women of distinction. Like Woman House, the dinner party was intensely collaborative, featuring potluck suppers to discuss the ideas and execution of the project. Judy Chicago relied heavily on a young graduate student in art history, Diane Jellin, and the project required continual fundraising and technical problem solving, learning from ceramicists and needlework specialists, for example. As the work took shape, Judy Chicago's vision became clearer. It was to be a celebration of women throughout the ages with the question in mind, what would happen if women occupied seats of honor at the table of history? Beginning with women as symbolic figures, she named them primordial goddess and fertile goddess, she arranged her 39 representative figures into 3 groups, filling the 3 wings or sides of the triangle. Prehistory to classic Rome was the first, from the beginnings of Christianity to the Reformation, the second, and from the American Revolution to the Women's Revolution, the third. Each place setting was defined by a handmade ceramic plate and an embroidered runner distinctive to the historical figure, as well as identical goblets, napkins, and ceramic flatware. The design of each plate was a variation on a theme representing both the vulva and the butterfly, which she viewed as a symbol of liberation. The 39 variations on the theme represent both the commonality of women's biological identity and the special traits for which each woman was being honored. So for Boudica, for example, the 1st century warrior queen who resisted the spread of the Roman Empire in Britain, she incorporates both a suggestion of Stonehenge, see that around the sides, and the helmet of a Celtic warrior, see that in the middle? It's like duck rabbit. You can see one and then you can see the other. Her plate for Theodora, the 6th century empress of Byzantium, who ruled jointly with her husband Justinian, echoes the mosaic portrait in the Church of San Vitale, Ravenna. And the embroidered gold halo on the runner echoes the halo in the mural. In the 3rd wing of the triangle, as the artwork progresses toward images of women's liberations, the plates themselves become 3-dimensional, as if women's accomplishments allow them literally to rise. The plate representing Mary Wollstonecraft, 18th century feminist and author of Vindication of the Rights of Women, is the first to escape from the plane of the plate's surface, and the runner, elaborately embroidered on satin, portrays girls studying under the direction of a woman teacher who points to the slogan, "The education of girls is a right, not a privilege." But the back of the runner graphically depicts Wollstonecraft's death at the age of 38 in childbirth, with her husband, William Godwin, holding the baby daughter who would grow up to be Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein. Feminism triumphs, however, in the place setting honoring Susan B. Anthony. This plate is vividly 3-dimensional, and the runner recapitulates the triangular theme of the entire artwork, with the names of other feminist leaders sharing the spotlight, embroidered on strips radiating out like rays of the rising sun. The trajectory of the dinner party leads directly to Judy Chicago's own world, concluding with 2 place settings celebrating artists of the 20th century, Virginia Woolf and Georgia O'Keeffe. Georgia O'Keeffe is the only living woman to take her place at the table, and Judy Chicago acknowledges my own aesthetic debt to her, adding that she intended O'Keeffe's place settings to embody the yearning for liberation which so many women represented in the dinner party, to which so many of the women represented in the dinner party aspired. Beginning with female goddesses and ending with a living painter, the dinner party not only reclaims the forgotten histories of the little-known women, it also asserts the power of the artist to re-envision the world. There is more to say about the artwork itself, including comments on the intense research undertaken by Judy Chicago's team at a time when information about women's history was hard to find. Much can also be said about inclusion and exclusion, for despite their attempt to survey world cultures and histories, the work remains Eurocentric, with few women of color and little understanding of the variety of world perspectives. However, as the final wing makes clear, Judy Chicago was asserting not only the centrality of the arts, but its mission to reclaim forgotten histories and redefine citizenship itself. In March 1979, the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco gave the dinner party its first exhibition. The installation attracted as many as 100,000 spectators during its 3-month run, but critical reception was mixed. A reviewer for Newsweek called it an ambitious paean to feminism and offered the self-fulfilling prophecy that it would be wonderfully controversial on all counts, as art, as message, and for combining the two. In the San Francisco Chronicle, art critic Alfred Frankenstein fumed. The emphasis throughout the show is primarily biological. If any man were to put on a show like this, the feminists would burn it down. And a critic in the Los Angeles Times Book Review blasted it as a soggy spectacle and a grotesque embarrassment, a lumbering mishmash of sleaze and cheese. Yeah. Such controversy meant that Judy Chicago's plans for an extended tour fizzled. 2 other museums that had slated exhibitions canceled them, and the dinner party itself became a leftover, locked in storage. Judy Chicago was convinced that the negative reviews resulted from what she called a larger pattern of discrimination against women and women's art. Although the work was retrieved and toured nationally and internationally during the 1980s, that's when John and I saw it, a devastating campaign of scorn followed in 1990 when Judy Chicago offered to donate the dinner party to the University of the District of Columbia. The idea that a feminist work would find a prominent home in the nation's capital provoked a political storm. Pugnacious right-wing Congressman Robert Dornan, notorious for his vicious assaults in the name of decency, attacked the work as pornographic. And student strikes and threats to the UDC budget ultimately caused Judy Chicago to withdraw her offer. Only in 2002 did the dinner party emerge from its moldering entombment when it was purchased by the Elizabeth Sackler Foundation and donated to the Brooklyn Museum of Art, where it remains the centerpiece of the Elizabeth A. Sackler Center for Feminist Art. In some ways, Judy Chicago welcomed the controversy that surrounded the dinner party during its first decades. She is a polemicist, a fighter. Her biographer, Gail Levin, reproduces on the cover of her book a photograph from 1970 showing her costumed and posed as a boxer. But her intention to reclaim neglected histories is better served in the 21st century through the official recognition of a major art museum. Viewing the installation at the Brooklyn Museum, the visitor enters a corridor draped like the nave of a cathedral, with banners boldly proclaiming the prophecy of a feminist God. And she gathered all before her, and she made for them a sign to see. And lo, they saw a vision. From this day forth, like to like in all things. And then all that divided them merged, and then everywhere was Eden once again. Today, shelves of books recognize women's contributions to art, science, religion, literature, and other fields. And conversations about feminism continue in the academy and beyond. The dinner party contributed to this expansion of empathy and knowledge by celebrating women's citizenship and accomplishments, and significantly, art itself. Part 2. Redefining Citizenship, Tony Kushner, Angels in America. In his prize-winning 2-part play, Angels in America, a gay fantasia on national themes, Tony Kushner offered his version of Ellison's raft of perception, hope, and entertainment. Angels was widely acclaimed because of its sweep and scope, its insight into the soul of American democracy in the late 1980s. It has been called the greatest American play of the waning years of the 20th century. A 2001 production by Playmakers Repertory Company, which I hope a number of you saw, included Matt Carlson as Prior Walter, Catherine Hunter Williams as the Angel, and Jeffrey Blair Cornell in a memorable performance as Roy Cohn. Of course, the availability on DVD of the 2003 HBO version, adapted for the screen by Tony Kushner and directed by Mike Nichols, keeps a powerful version of the play in the public eye. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I just want to give a bit of a plot summary before I start talking about why I think it's important. Part one, and it's a two-part play, as you are probably aware. Part one, Millennium Approaches, traces the unraveling of the relationship of two gay men, Prior Walter and Louis Ironson, as Prior endures the ravages of AIDS. The epidemic was so new when the play was first presented in 1990 that Kushner included significant exposition to explain the disease to audiences as well as to the characters. As Louis flees from the relationship and Prior seethes with pain, fear, and anger, their lives intersect with those of Joe, a closeted Mormon lawyer, his depressed and agoraphobic wife Harper, and Joe's mother Hannah, who arrives from Salt Lake City to try to put her son back on track. What an amazing cast it is in that DVD. Joe is a protege of the infamous counter-espionage attorney Roy Cohn, who brags about his role in securing the execution of convicted spy Ethel Rosenberg. Exploiting Joe's patriotism and ambition, Roy offers to place him in an influential Washington job with the ulterior motive of protecting himself from disbarment. After Joe meets Louis, he begins to acknowledge his own sexuality, leaving Harper ever more isolated and delusional. Meanwhile, as Prior's disease worsens, he experiences visions, including a visit by two of his ancestors, also named Prior Walter, who died in other historical plagues. Then, in the culminating moments of the play, an angel crashes through the ceiling of his bedroom, declaring, "Greetings, prophet, the great work begins. The messenger has arrived." So powerful was the conclusion of Millennium Approaches that some viewers believed the play ended with Prior's death, rather than with the apparition that would shape the second half of the drama. Part two, Perestroika, takes its name from the political thaw or opening in Russia in the late 1980s, associated with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. Indeed, the revelations and resolutions of the second play bring about a thaw in the fear, grief, and anger of Millennium Approaches. Prior describes his encounter with the angel to his friend Belize, a gay nurse whose patients include Roy Cohn, now declining rapidly from AIDS himself. The angel has told a story of abandonment that resonates with Prior's own. God has left heaven sometime after the San Francisco earthquake, preferring humanity with its restless transformations to the angels, who are beautifully static and fixed. The angel's message to Prior, he must be a prophet for human stasis, thus sending God back to heaven. And the angel says, "Before the boiling of blood and the searing of skin comes the secret catastrophe. Before life on earth becomes finally merely impossible, it will for a long time before have become completely unbearable. You have driven him away. You must stop moving." Seeking the meaning of the angel's revelation, Prior visits the Mormon Visitor Center, where he meets both Hannah and Harper. Using a device of overlapping split scenes on the stage, Kushner allows the stories to intermingle. Pryor helps Harper understand Joe's sexuality, while Hannah finds the humanity to escort him to the hospital, where he experiences both a health crisis and a further vision. Who is more suited to sharing the angelic visitation than a Mormon woman? Transformed by the vision too, Hannah advises Pryor to wrestle with the angel. In a hallucinatory episode, Pryor visits heaven, which, as promised by the angel, looks like San Francisco after the earthquake, gives back the angel's prophetic book and demands a blessing. As Kushner explains in his notes to the play, the Hebrew word for blessing can be translated as more life. Pryor survives the crisis with a renewed will to live. Meanwhile, Roy Cohn is dying of AIDS, but not before securing a stash of the then experimental drug AZT. Defiant to the end, Roy tricks his old nemesis, the ghost of Ethel Rosenberg, also played by Meryl Streep in the HBO production, and last appears on the telephone offering to defend God against a suit for abandonment. Lewis and Belize secure the drugs for Pryor, now watched over by Hannah. Harper leaves her marriage, headed for San Francisco, able to go into the world with her own revelation. In this world, there is a kind of painful progress, longing for what we've left behind, dreaming ahead. And in the epilogue, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the sense that the world is indeed changing, a new community of friends, Lewis, Hannah, Pryor, and Belize, sit at the Bethesda Fountain in Central Park, celebrating life and its possibilities. How do these two plays explore issues of citizenship and identity in the modern world? Kushner subtitled Angels in America a gay fantasia on national themes, and both of these terms reveal his purposes and methods. His bold evocation of Mormon history defines the national theme. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the only major religion to originate in the United States, founded on the revelations of Joseph Smith, directed by an angel to a buried book, which he published as the Book of Mormon in 1830. Mormon history also recapitulated the story of the American frontier, as Smith and his supporters moved west, founding settlements in Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois, before Smith's death at the hands of a mob in 1844. Under the leadership of Brigham Young, members of the church moved on to Utah and founded Salt Lake City. In Kushner's modern America, angels are not to be trusted, and his Mormon characters make a reverse migration eastward to confront the changing world. Joe Pitt, who cannot reconcile his Mormon beliefs with his inner sexual identity, is a lost soul. But both Harper and Hannah are redeemed by the expansion of their humanity. Theirs is a national story for the 21st century. Angels in America sounds the national theme in other ways as well. Kushner's characters, black and white, gay and straight, male and female, embody other aspects of the American story. Millennium Approaches begins with the funeral of Lewis's grandmother, a Jewish woman who made a crossing unimaginable to her descendants. She carried the old world on her back across the ocean in a boat, and she put it down on Grand Concourse Avenue in Flatbush. Foul-mouthed Roy Cohn is Jewish, and he hated Jewish Ethel Rosenberg with a vengeance. In his distorted vision of patriotism, he revels in his power. I have forced my way into history. I ain't never gonna die. To which Ethel replies, history is about to crack wide open. Millennium approaches. Equally a part of the national story, Belize, the gay black nurse who hates and pities Roy, understands his own marginalization on multiple levels. I am trapped in a world of white people, he exclaims, and he cuts through Lewis's endless talk with exasperation. Lewis and his big ideas. Big ideas are all you love. America is what Lewis loves. Well, I hate America, Lewis. I hate this country. It's just big ideas and stories and people dying and people like you. At the play's end, Belize, like Lewis, finds redemption in reclaiming America through community. But the play is also a gay fantasia, and part of its achievement is its scintillating wit, its devastating humor that enlivens even the most wrenching scenes. The talking mannequins at the Mormon Visitor Center piously repeat the heroic story of westward migration, while simultaneously the abandoned wife, Harper, retells it as horrific. When will we arrive in Zion, Father? When will our great exodus finally be done? And speaking over these lines, Harper replies, never. You'll die of snakebite, and your brother looks like scorpion food to me. As the angel descends at the end of Millennium approaches, Pryor alternates terrified pleading with an awestruck whisper, very Steven Spielberg. Roy snaps at Belize, you touch that phone and I'll bite. I got rabies. Pryor tells Harper he has come to the Mormon Visitor Center because he is an angelologist. And as Hannah begins to warm to Pryor, he tells her, I wish you would be more true to your demographic profile. Life is confusing enough. And of course, there are the angels who speak in a mock biblical, mock prophetic gibberish. I am the bird of America, the bald eagle, continental principality, lumen phosphor floor candle. When Pryor makes his way to heaven, he finds the angels huddled around a table with ancient maps, navigation equipment, and a crackling 1940s radio. I would like to know, what is a vacuum tube? Pryor's parting words to the angels give advice on suing God. If he returns, take him to court. He walked out on us. He ought to pay. It would be easy to exaggerate the play's jokiness, and in fact, Kushner's production notes warn against too much humor. The play is cheapened irreparably when the actors playing the angel, and especially Pryor, fail to convey the gravity of these situations. A Pryor played for laughs is death to this enterprise. But the over-the-top nature of some of its scenes and repartee make it not just a fantasy, but a fantasia, and exaggerated as Walt Disney's riffs on classical music in his film Fantasia of 1940. Life, death, evil, and redemption constitute a national story that is reflected through the lens of gay-cultured, queered, and nuanced. And the particular combination of humor with the grim realities of sickness, death, and fear of abandonment make Angels in America such a profound commentary on history, vision, and citizenship. Almost a generation younger than Judy Chicago, Tony Kushner frames very differently his interest in the themes of citizenship and democracy. The Dinner Party embodied recovery and inclusion, reassessing history to make a place at the table for women throughout time. The viewer is not the 40th dinner guest, but a spectator to a reimagined utopian vision. Angels in America, by contrast, takes audiences on a difficult journey inside the mind and heart of characters in turmoil. Whereas Judy Chicago worked to bring marginalized women into the mainstream, Tony Kushner projects a world without margins or center. Mormons, Jews, blacks, homosexuals, in his play, their stories are the national story. And so in the play's epilogue, its valedictory, Pryor Walter speaks directly to the audience, making Kushner's claims explicit. No.
Fountain's not flowing now. They turn it off in the winter. Ice in the pipes. But in the summer, it's a sight to see. I want to be around to see it. I plan to be. I hope to be. This disease will be the end of many of us, but not nearly all. And the dead will be commemorated, and we'll struggle on with the living, and we are not going away. We won't die secret deaths anymore. The world only spins forward. We will be citizens. The time has come. Bye now. You are fabulous, each and every one. And I bless you. More life. The great work begins.
The world only spins forward. We will be citizens. The time has come. You are fabulous. Writer Michael Cunningham asked Kushner in an interview whether he really meant what he said. Even if your hairdo is grounds for criminal prosecution and you voted for Bush both times and you're really just sitting there thinking about how you're going to get your car out of traffic and back to New Jersey before the rush really starts, we're all forgiven. Did you really mean it? Are we all really fabulous? And Kushner answered, in a certain sense, the people in the theater are all fabulous at the moment that Pryor blesses everybody. They're fabulous, whether they want to be or not. And when they go out into the world, they have to then decide whether they're going to earn it or not. Looking back on his path-breaking plays, Kushner articulated something like writer Mario Vargas Llosa's vision that the arts can bring audiences to examine the world that we inhabit and to try, even though it is more and more an impossible task, to make it more closely resemble the world that we would like to inhabit. Part 3, Reexamining Legacies. Bill T. Jones, fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray. The choreographer Bill T. Jones has never been afraid of controversy, and he has consistently innovated on the cutting edge of dance and theater. Beginning in the 1970s with his dance and life partner, Arnie Zane, Jones explored both form and emotion in solos like this one, Zane photographed on the roof of the American Dance Asylum, and in duets like this one, Valley Cottage Duet of 1982, the year they founded the Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Dance Company. Their work featured stylized and abstract gesture, energy, and the appearance of improvisation within a carefully choreographed performance. Jones has said about this early work that it was free of personality, free of social context, free of the biases toward content. It is purely about form. Their commitment to pure form began to change during the course of the decade of the 1980s. And as Jones wrote, things that had once been personal were being broadcast into households around the world. Working like Tony Kushner under the shadow of AIDS and the politics of the Reagan era, Jones and Zane began to reflect on subjects from the news. Freedom of Information, an energetic ensemble piece, took its inspiration from an airplane crash in the Potomac River in the early 1980s, and it used a spoken narrative to counterpoint a whirling deconstruction of modern dance and ballet movements. We broke them into odd, angular partnerings, subverted them with the egalitarianism of contact improvisation. Abstract form battled content, and Jones later commented, our choreography moved toward the depiction of a community, a society. But the AIDS crisis shadowed their creative life. Arnie Zane's health deteriorated until his death from AIDS-related lymphoma in 1988 at the age of 40. Now working alone, Jones created dances that responded to the grief and pain of the historical moment, starting with a piece called Absence, which he dedicated to Zane's parent. In 1989, D-Man in the Waters was a tribute to company member Damien Acquavilla, who was so sick with AIDS and AIDS-related dementia that he could no longer walk by the time the piece was performed, and Jones carried him on stage to execute his solo with arm movements only. In the 1990s, Jones deepened his engagement with issues of identity and citizenship. Last Supper at Uncle Tom's Cabin, The Promised Land, a project he and Arnie Zane had discussed before Zane's death, addressed America's legacy of slavery and racism. After reading Uncle Tom's Cabin, which he pronounced hokum, misinformation, moving, infuriating, beautiful, embarrassing, and important, Jones conceived of a multimedia theatrical project that would speak in a fragmented Black voice about being human. The 3.5-hour-long production that resulted was sprawling, ambitious, and engaged with social, political, and spiritual issues. It used jazz, rap, and poetry, alluded to Balinese masked drama, to minstrelsy, to Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. Performers included civic and cultural leaders, a former drug addict recently released from prison for murder, and Jones's own mother, who sang gospel hymns each night. At the end of the evening, performers removed their clothing and approached the footlights, leading New York Times reviewer Anna Kisselgoff to declare, "Anyone who has mistakenly wandered onto a nudist beach will feel right at home in the audience," before praising the piece for its vital streak of profound truth. In his autobiography, Last Night on Earth, Jones commented that the piece's conclusion was a visual manifestation of my profound sense of belonging. This was my portrait of us, all of us, and this is who I am too, one of us. It was my battle to disavow any identity as a dying outcast and to affirm our commonality. In it, some 1,000 people from 30 cities stood naked, took a bow, and said, "We are not afraid." Making a theatrical piece about slavery and racism, Jones, like Kushner, confronted questions of survival and citizenship in the era of AIDS. After revealing his own status as HIV positive in the mid-90s, Jones turned to broader questions of health and survivorship, conducting workshops for individuals who had been diagnosed with life-threatening diseases or who had endured the death of a loved one. Transcripts from these workshops became part of the spoken text for an evening-long theater piece, Still Here, which opened in 1994. Now Jones combined dance, spoken word, music, and video to create a powerful meditation on life and death. Such an adventurous undertaking evoked its share of criticism. The New Yorker's dance critic, Eileen Croce, wrote a long article about the piece while proclaiming proudly that she refused to see it, labeling it intolerably voyeuristic and victim art. But praise followed as well, including a MacArthur Genius Award in 1994, and an admiring 1997 film about Jones by Bill Moyers. Exploring philosophical and spiritual questions, Bill T. Jones took dance and theater into new territory. Jones returned to questions about American history, race, and citizenship in another evening-long theatrical piece performed here at Memorial Hall in Chapel Hill on January 10th, 2010. Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, created for the bicentennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth in 2009, takes its title from Lincoln's second inaugural address. It explores the fraught subject of American hopes, fears, and prayers in the context of the nation's history of racism and the tragedy of Lincoln's assassination. Jones has told reporters that Abraham Lincoln was the one white man he was allowed to love unconditionally. Yet as he prepared the piece, he was struck with Lincoln's dismissal of social equality between the races in the Lincoln-Douglas debates. and torn between his admiration of Father Abraham the Emancipator and his disappointment at Lincoln's limitations. Jones read widely in biographical and historical sources and visited the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library in Springfield, Illinois, where a curator showed him Lincoln's stovepipe hat. He told an interviewer that he was trying to turn myself inside out to make Lincoln's legacy about what I have always felt it was about, something about human rights, something about a politician who truly jumps head and shoulders above the discourse of his time. In a documentary film about the making of the work, A Good Man, Jones speaks movingly about his understanding of Lincoln's legacy. Are we good people? Am I a good man? Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, forged an innovative mix of music, movement, spoken word, and video. Its set employs a cylindrical curtain on which words and images are projected and which swirls like a maelstrom to suggest the tumult of war. Its white pillars evoke American neoclassicism, the White House, and the memorials to the dead that would be built after the Civil War. Like Judy Chicago and Tony Kushner, Jones intertwines history with the present, narrating the biographies of Abraham and Mary Todd Lincoln, but also those of contemporary Americans, including Jones himself. Born in 1952, a family of field workers, 7 brothers and 4 sisters, a life in the theater. His great-grandmother, he thinks, was born a slave. Quotations from Lincoln's speeches, from Frederick Douglass, the King James Bible, Thomas Jefferson, and above all, Walt Whitman, provide the spoken text, and the music draws from American folk songs and spirituals and works composed especially for the performance. A slave auction draws the audience directly into the painful subject of American slavery, reciting the names of body parts to the sound of a crackling whip. An immaculately dressed narrator forces the audience to realize that their own gaze replicates to some extent the acceptance of slavery that the Civil War would challenge. Yeah, that's it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Let us begin. Head, hair, tongue, lips, teeth, jaws and the jaw hinges, nose, nostrils of the nose, cheeks, forehead, chin, throat, back of the neck, strong shoulders. Do you hear me? Strong shoulders, manly beard, scapula. Ladies and gentlemen, do I hear hind shoulders in the ample side round of the chest, wrist and wrist joints? Yes, sir, wrist and wrist joints. Hand, knuckles, thumb, forefinger, finger balls, finger joints, fingernails. Yes, sir. Hips, man balls, man roots. Who wants a strong set of thighs well carrying the trunk of arm? Leg fibers, knee, upper leg, under leg. Do you hear me? Going, going, going. So.
Stylized movement of the sort Jones had been perfecting since the 1970s here draws the audience into a fresh vision of strong and suffering bodies, contemporary and historical. Fondly has a narrative structure spelled out in the production's program notes. It tells specific stories, a loving marriage between Mary and Abraham Lincoln, an anguished duet of a slave girl and a predatory master, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, war, assassination, and the mournful journey of Lincoln's funeral train. But as Lincoln told his company, their dancing bodies are only part of his vision, supported as well by narrative, music, and set design. The production is larger than the sum of its parts. Viewers are drawn into the maelstrom of history and challenged to examine their values and assumptions. There was a time when I had to choose between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, Jones told his dancers in a conversation recorded in the film A Good Man. What does slavery have to do with that? Slavery is a memory of something you cannot remember, yet you cannot forget. I think the piece wants to be about that secret hope I have. Hope. The great man tells you, you too can make it. I think that's what it would be. I think that's what it would like to leave in the air when it's over. Fondly Do We Hope ends with the passing of time, projections on the curtain now turned red, dates that mark the years after the Civil War, up to 2009 and beyond, asserting the relevance of Lincoln's life today and in the future. We are not enemies but friends, Lincoln stated in his first inaugural address. We must not be enemies. The epilogue invokes the steely determination of Lincoln's second inaugural address. Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with a sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still must it be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Adding to Lincoln's words, language from the Book of Revelation and Walt Whitman's The Wound Dresser, and to music by Felix Mendelssohn, Jerome Began, Chris Lancaster, and George Lewis Jr., the performance concludes, every drop of blood, I do not give out. May this scourge, may this mighty scourge pass away, pass away. Priceless blood reddens the grass. I am faithful. I do not give out. Like Judy Chicago and Tony Kushner, Bill T. Jones answers the challenge framed by Mario Vargas Llosa, how to make art that creates responsible and critical citizens conscious of the need continuously to examine the world that we inhabit and to try, even though it is more and more an impossible task, to make it more closely resemble the world that we would like to inhabit. A Black artist confronting America's racially troubled past and thinking his way into a humane and forgiving future. Bill T. Jones takes on issues of citizenship, identity, and humanity in a vision of history with emotional depth and relevance to the contemporary world. The craftsmanship of Judy Chicago's dinner place settings, the wit and poignancy of Tony Kushner's dialogue, the snap and verve of Bill T. Jones's movements are not luxuries. They are necessities, examples of art's indispensability. Art like theirs helps us to understand our own humanity and challenges us to become our better selves. Thank you. Very much. God.
Thank you, Joy, so much. My name is Max Orr. I'm the Associate Director for Humanities, and I'm going to ask if there are questions, and I'm just going to repeat your questions so that they get recorded. So please, do we have questions for Joy? Yes.
Not so much a question as something that I'd like to offer that I think bolsters the argument that you've been making. As you well know, I was production dramaturg on Playmaker's production of Angels of America. And there's a moment in Perestroika when they first go to heaven, and the angels I'm hearing, have we not eyes? Do we not read? And when he gave that direction to Kathy Williams, to the actor, it clicked. And that sense of humanity there, the way that Kushner gives us a sense of who these spectral beings are, the angels, the racist, Roy Cohn, the Mormon mother and the gay man with AIDS, that whole trajectory that you laid out so beautifully is there.
Thank you so much, Adam. I hope everyone can hear that, because Max,
It's going to
you
be
can
hard to
never
repeat that.
repeat the whole thing. But having the inside, if you didn't hear it, it's Adam talking about his experience as dramaturge for that production of Angels here, and the moment at which it was possible for all the actors to understand that vision of humanity. Thank you for that. That's great.
We have a question back here.
Joy, at the beginning of your talk, you had a picture up of a YouTube screen with Beethoven's Ninth, and then that very amusing picture of the woman with her child taking a picture of herself in front of the sculpture. And that led me initially to think about the difference between, it's so relevant today, between live performance and sitting at one's computer. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what you view as the necessity, if you view the necessity of live performance as opposed to digital or sort of sitting at home and watching it on a screen.
For those that didn't hear, the question regarded the distinction between live performance and those that are digital, and the importance of live performance.
Well, it was no accident that I chose Beethoven's Ninth, because everyone in this room has the ability to go to Memorial Hall next Wednesday and hear that performed in a way that you will think you'd never heard it before. You're right, I kind of, well, and then what did I do? I showed you videos, so in a way I strayed from that point, and I was talking, so that was my kind of, that would be another whole Adams lecture, maybe next year. How wonderful that we have the opportunity to familiarize ourselves with all of these things. But if we think that that substitutes, and that we can then close the museums and, only have people record in studios and then only make DVDs or movies, I think we'll be just so much poorer. And that would be another whole day to make that case. I'm not, I'm not trying to, like King Canute, hold back the tide. And the digital world gives us many wonderful opportunities, but the live encounter, whether it's with the artwork on the museum walls or the performance that's in the room with you, I just think it's irreplaceable, and we shouldn't forget that.
John?
I'd like to ask about the final moment in the Kushner play. And I'm going to put it this way. I've been on the selection committee for the book for the first-year students several times. And there's been some resistance to choosing a work of fiction. And part of the problem is because a work of fiction doesn't come out and tell us what it wants us to know. And there's this fear, well, the students won't get the message. And I think, real contrast for me between the Kushner and Bill T. Jones is that the Bill T. Jones it trusted the piece. It didn't worry that I wasn't going to get the message. It didn't need to tell me at the end what my takeaway is. And so I was just wondering your response to that.
And briefly, I would say the question regards the ambiguity of fiction and how you derive a message from fiction, and Joy will beef that up some.
I don't mind. It's a different experience. I don't mind fictional works that also tell you what they want you to know. I love the ending of the Tony Kushner piece, and it's like going to a sermon or something like that. It has its place, but I also agree. And we're in this wonderful year of celebrating modernism and the coming of modernism, which kind of stepped back from a lot of narrative and explanatory and overt messages in art, whether it be music or drama or literature. As a professor, I wouldn't have a job if there weren't some pieces that didn't need to be untangled and explained. So I'm all for that. I don't mind the moralistic if it's well done, which I think that is. But I agree with, I know exactly what you mean. And if you pick a work of art that is sufficiently intellectually challenging that its meaning isn't obvious, then it's not, that's harder to, especially, it could be harder to put forward. I wouldn't mind if they chose Angels in America. Yeah. Is that?
I think Bill Ferris has a question in the back.
Joy, could you reflect for a moment on your field of American studies and how it allows you to embrace such a range of artistic expression, history, and American culture? This was an extraordinary presentation, and how you as a scholar of American studies have the skills to bridge all those worlds.
The question asked Joy to reflect on American studies as a very broad field and the benefits of American studies.
I did not plant, even though Bill is my colleague and has helped us develop this PhD program, I did not plant that question. Sometimes I tell people I'm a monster of American studies because both my undergraduate and my graduate degrees and all my teaching ever since has all been about making connections, and so I just deeply believe in it. And I think there are many realms of intellectual inquiry that do that. And Bill, your own work in music and Southern history and Southern literature is another great example of that. I mean, I respect and I enjoy the kind of work that burrows down through deep, deep knowledge of some very specific field. For me, what's been exciting in the 80 years John and I have both been, I love that, just to look at me, you wouldn't think I'd been teaching here for 80 years, but if you, but seriously, in the 40 years I've been teaching here, that to me is satisfying. So I can't tell you, American Studies isn't the only field, but by all means, encourage all your bright students to come get our PhD in American Studies, because they can do it too.
Yes, question here.
Yes, in today's world of high-tech education, or education about high-tech things, how would you propose that education be broadened so that the high-tech folks want to concentrate on that activities or one might think so? Experience it, yet the appreciation for the other side of things, which is what we're talking about.
The question was, how do you get in this high-tech world those that are in that high-tech world to appreciate what it is that the humanities bring?
Well, I think my colleagues here from the college and the university, Holden, I deeply appreciate your coming today and talking. Terry, what you said about the college needing our support. I don't think it's one or the other. I think that science, technology, research, math, why wouldn't we pursue that to the utmost? But I guess when we're talking about education, that's why I still feel that liberal arts education, even as part of a science and technology training, gives you things to think about for the rest of your life, even while you're innovating and experimenting. And I mean, you're here today, so I hope you agree with that. So that's all I would say, that we...
We have a question from Lloyd Kramer. Lloyd?
We've just come through a political campaign.
Really? No.
Very often, I think we feel bombarded with products that we're almost like consumers of advertising. Could you tell us how you think the arts can differentiate between our roles as consumers and citizens?
Ooh.
And what makes a consumer different from a citizen or a citizen different from a consumer?
Great.
What makes a consumer different from a citizen, and what are the parameters to distinguish the two?
Well, I guess if you follow Martha Nussbaum's argument that the purpose of the liberal arts, the purpose of studying education for democracy should all be about critical thinking. And whether we're talking about distinguishing between the claims of two political candidates or being swept away by the claims of a product that we're supposed to buy. I mean, there are some powerful tools out there that encourage people not to be reflective and not to be thoughtful. I'm at the university. I believe in people thinking and being critical thinkers, but I think it is all too easy in so many walks of life, so many parts of our experience, just to kind of float on the tide and to take whatever seems to be a persuasive claim, and either if it's toothpaste or a political candidate. So we should be smart consumers, but we won't be good citizens. I mean, I know you agree with me, so it's fair enough to say that. But the essential task of citizenship is to keep our wits about us and have our critical edge there. And as Nussbaum points out, that thinking about having empathy and understanding and a complex understanding of others through whatever it is, literature, drama, film, music, visual arts, that those are skills that then carry over to the world of, to our role as citizens, so we don't become what she calls just machines.
Yes, question here.
Hi, Joy. Thank you very much.
Hi, Jan.
Speaking of critical thinking, I noticed in your talk that sometimes the critics were the bad guys, especially between Chicago and Georgia. And so was it they were lacking in critical thinking or lacking in empathy, or is there an alternative? I mean, they worked really well as the bad guys, but I wonder, so is there a better role for a critic? If they've been more schooled in being critics or empathetic critics, would they have been more, would they have got it?
The question concerns criticism and critics and whether they are perhaps doing it the right way. I don't know how to quite sum that up, or whether they're perceiving it the way you do.
You caught me, Jan. I was seeking a little comic relief and some dramatic forward movement in my talk itself. I certainly did not mean to imply that no critics get it, and just to point out that the controversy isn't necessarily a bad, or that when controversy occurs, we shouldn't necessarily turn away from our engagement with the arts or with those arts pieces. And I'll re-examine my conscience and wonder if I shouldn't have put some of the more perceptive. Yeah, there are plenty of them. I just chose a few bad guys to keep you all awake.
HR question.
Well, why don't you?
The question was simply, how were these choices made for the three pieces?
Well, I don't exactly teach any course that's like this, but each of these three figures has featured in my own teaching over the years. So I was partly, once I knew what I wanted to talk about, I drew on, I could do, come back tomorrow and we'll do three other people. They're not the only ones, but I was looking for that range of media, visual arts, drama, and dance. And I was looking for a range of topics. So I thought you were going to say, don't I have any sense of humor? And I was going to say, that's why I started with Sondheim, to say that it's not necessarily always just, heavy and unpleasant. But so I was looking for, these aren't the only three examples, but I was looking for three that would kind of makes sense for us to think about for an hour, and then there are others to think about later. Thank you for that question, though.
We have Holden and then a family question.
Okay, well, I was just thinking about John McGowan's question and Angels in America. And don't you think that part of the explicit direction there is because of the time at which that came and sort of the vacuum that we had in the 1980s, and this whole generation of people who Tony Kushner and I are both part of, who weren't part of the civil rights movement and not really even part of the feminist movement that you described, and needed to be told that the great work begins. This is what you're supposed to do. And I just think that was a reaction to the circumstances that we had had in the 1980s.
That's a great point.
The question regards the contemporary circumstances around which Tony Kushner's play was created and the impetus for that.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point. That in a way, when he has, of course, I think of HBO, where he's literally looking you right in the face and putting his hand on the camera, but on the stage too. However you do it, he turns and addresses, doesn't he, the audience. Kind of like a Shakespeare play, right? At the end, our role is done. Give us your hands, and we'll be off. Let us know if you liked it or not. And it was kind of, and I think that's a great point, that it was at a time, the issues he was bringing up then needed to, and arguably still maybe still need to be seen as one of the kinds of civil rights issues that people could connect with other forms. But when he says the great work begins, the funny thing is how the end of Act 1, you think it's the angel that's telling you the great work begins, and I'm going to tell you the meaning of life. But in the end of Act 2, the great work is the work that we find for ourselves, and that's another reason why I love that play.
We have a question from the family.
Yes.
I wanted to, not to get you into next year's lecture too much, but I want to nudge you a little bit more both on the question of reproduction versus direct engagement, and then also this question of critical controversy. And you seem to be suggesting both with the image of the blood-filled mannequin being upended on stage and the hostile reception for the dinner party, both critical and popular, that part of the difference between in-person engagement and reproduction, and also part of the necessity of the arts, is sometimes to be challenging and to generate controversy, and that's not negative, but sometimes even an intention. Is that?
That's great. Do you want to?
Yeah, the question regarded critical engagement and reproduction, and I'll let you take it from there, Joy.
And what a brilliant thought. This is my son. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Peter, for that great. What's that, dear? Who's a scientist? Right. Right. Who's a scientist? I didn't want to say that. Well, people could get outraged. People have been outraged by books. People get upset by books. People can get outraged by movies. But in this year that we've been marking the 100th anniversary of the premiere of The Rite of Spring, when audiences to a dance and music performance booed, hissed, stamped, drowned out the music from the stage, I think that's a great point, that there's something about maybe part of the necessity of the arts is that when you're at a first-person event, you can talk back to it. Although, as a polite person, I don't tend to I don't tend to enjoy that. But yeah, thank you. That's great.
Yes, Brian.
Coming back to Holden Thorpe's point, isn't it a little strange that the more successful you are as a playwright, and there we were speaking about this AIDS and gay rights and so forth, and now it's accepted as appropriate. Now that play might be forgotten in 50 years' time, and therefore masterpieces, if you're really good as a playwright, you'll be forgotten.
you want to?
The question regards a sense of the efficacy of masterpieces, and to address, how it is that these plays have had such an impact, and the playwright can go on, but the impact endures.
Or maybe you were saying the opposite, which is back to John McGowan's point, that something that wears its argument on its sleeve, if you win the argument, then you don't need the play anymore. Isn't that kind of what you were saying? Or something more complex and difficult to understand, maybe that has another role to play generations on while people try to figure out, again, what it means. Now that I've described what you said, I can't remember what I was going to say about it. Except, let's see. Well, I did have something else to say about that. I think that's a good point, but I know what I was going to say. So, late-breaking news, Tony Kushner is, of course, the screenwriter for this new film on Lincoln that's just opening right now. So bringing the whole question, that one problem is, if you've brilliantly addressed kind of one set of issues, what do you do next? Do you keep going back to that same set? I thought when you started your question, I thought you were going to ask, well, what happens to the artist who succeeds in getting people really excited about some issues? So do they just keep doing that same issue over and over again? But how do they ever recapitulate or find another cause? And which is one reason why so many brilliant artists write one great book or one great play, and then they can't recapture that. I don't think anything Judy Chicago has done since then is nearly as interesting as The Dinner Party, to me, just my opinion. So both of those halves of that, I take your point.
Yes, go ahead. How does rock music fit into this spectrum of art?
Oh dear, you should ask about something I know about. I mean, I can see how it fits in. I just don't happen to like it much or know much about it. But I'm sure it does, and my colleagues who are more hip than I am could tell you. But were you thinking of something when you asked that question? I mean, do you see it as related or as different, or? Yeah. So another way of saying what you might be bringing up is that something that seems strange and out of the ordinary and challenging and difficult to like later on can seem more acceptable. We don't really know what of the things that today might be controversial later will be considered classic, and I can go for that.
We have time for one more question. Betsy?
Just saying something about the arts and humanities is being important, even though they're not necessarily. And almost what she said. One of the things they do is they give people on the credit card to work a day for a break, so they can stop it and be critical thinkers. And I think how important creative artists are, for example, industrial design. You have your new gadgets coming out, somebody's got to make it work right, look beautiful. And that's why we can't let the arts get more initiative.
Yeah. I have nothing to say except thank you.
A clarion call supporting the arts.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Joy Kasson.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to the annual Adams Lecture. We are delighted to welcome you to the dinner for those that are coming at the Carolina Inn, and have a wonderful evening.